Hello, friends. This is Jim with Science Talk. I want to share with you this paper that appeared in Science in year 2015. And it's the title of the paper is called The Deep Ocean Under Climate Change. Now, what we're seeing here, that I'm outlining with the cursor here, is what basically can be considered to be an abstract, kind of a summation of the article. Typically, with scientific papers, we have an abstract that sums up the findings of the paper or what the paper purports to do, followed by an introduction, which relates the known information at the time. So it would be citations of other researchers and the work they've done. Typically, that's then concluded with, in this study, we set out to do whatever it may be. Then it's followed by your materials and methods, where you basically say how you did the study. Then you have the results section. This is the data that we have. Here are the analyses we've done. These are our findings. These are the significant results, the non-significant results, all the analytical stuff, if you will. And that's followed by a discussion, which then relates the current study with respect or in perspective to what's come before it and how it agrees, disagrees, relates, fills in missing pieces, and so forth. Typical, and this is how scientists communicate what they do. So this paper is more of a summary. So it's more like a discussion, kind of a, here's our understanding of the situation at this point. Okay. So, and then they start out here with most habitable space for life on Earth is not terrestrial. More than 90% of its livable volume is in the deep ocean. Deep ocean. Below water depths of 200 meters. The diverse ecosystem in this vast realm play a key role in regulating Earth's climate by absorbing excess heat and CO2 from the atmosphere. Were it not for the ocean, the atmosphere would have warmed up by 97 degrees Fahrenheit. Seriously, it would have killed us all. So the ocean is basically saving our bacon for the moment. And of course, the CO2 forms with the water to create carbonic acid, and I've discussed the problems associated with that. But also, without deep water formation and sinking, you can't transfer this heat from the surface to the deep water. That can't happen. So, but as we slow down the Atlantic meridional overturn circulation, slow down the deep water formation, that sequestering of heat to the depths is not likely to continue. And here's the statement. The deep ocean thus helps to buffer the greenhouse effect, but in the process it becomes warmer, more acidic, and less oxygenated. Now, the one that you see in parentheses, that is a reference to a research paper. Let me scroll down, and that's this one right here, Seymour et al. In PLOS, and it gives you the reference and the year it was published. And you've heard me mention the PLOS publication before. Different journals have different formats to do citations. Some is you at the end of the sentence, you put the person's name and followed by a comma and a year, maybe additional research papers, in parentheses at the end of the paper, or you open up a sentence with like Mora et al. In parentheses 2013 states, blah, 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 so on. So when you see these numbers in parentheses, that is a reference. And I will include the URL for this paper in the description box below. However, a little cautionary note, this is only for your purposes. You may not share it and definitely may not use it to make money off of. That would be in violation of copyright. It'd be a copyright infringement. So you can look at it, but that's only for your own personal use. Such changes threaten ocean productivity, biodiversity, and provisioning of living resources. Potential loss of deep sea biodiversity may suppress adaptation capacity and limit the living library of species. That's just another way of saying biodiversity decreasing. Genes, biomolecules available to future generations. The regulating capacity of the deep sea slows climate change while recycling nutrients for surface ecosystems. That's through the upwellings. I've discussed with you before in the with respect to the conveyor belt. Now, it goes on to say we don't know much about, there's a lot of species in the deep ocean that have yet to be described to science, which is true. So, this little diagram shows kind of humans and climate change in the deep ocean. So, this figure here is basically some sort of drilling for oil and gas. This looks like a heavy dozer here. So, that's like for mining operation. That's a garbage bag, so that's garbage. And then this is for fishing activities. So what we see here, this is coming off the shoreline. So this would be the continental shelf, then the continental slope, going down to the abyssal plains, where you might have a volcanic arc, a seamount. Basically, if a seamount extends beyond the sea surface, you have an island, like the Hawaiian Islands. If it doesn't, it's called a seamount. Here's an oceanic ridge, sea floor spreading. This is a submarine canyon, and here, of course, a trench here. And they give you the depths in meters, thousands of meters. Just kind of an overview. The red indicates the warming of the surface, and this dashed line is at the 200-meter line, so obviously this is not the scale. And lots of times this also equates to the photic zone, the layer of water where sunlight can penetrate down to. So that means this is the upper layers where the photosynthesis can take place. This, I guess, brown, you could say, is ocean acidification. The blue is deoxygenation. There are areas in the ocean that are now becoming anoxic and killing off major life form. And that's due to pollutions, nutrient overload. The water is becoming so warm that the dissolved oxygen content, the concentration decreases dramatically. So organisms are not able to get sufficient oxygen. So it creates like dead zones. Then you see decreasing POC flux, increasing POC flux. POC means particulate organic carbon. That usually could be like dead life forms sinking down through the water column. So I said the schematic illustrates the depth resolved confluence of current, proposed human exploitation activities, and waste disposal with CO2 induced change in temperature, pH, oxygenation of the deep ocean. Overlap of anthropogenic and climate stresses will be the greatest along continental margins and at bathyal depths, but changes throughout the deep ocean will compromise ecosystem services globally, basically how it functions. So, in the deep settings, deep depths of the ocean, animals can live for hundreds, fish to thousands, colonial corals of years. Great longevity and environmental stability may confer limited tolerance to change. That is, limited adaptation ability and possibly a long time lag between seafloor change and detectable change in fish production or carbon sequestration. Is as an example of the lag time, it's often said that the winter time in the ocean is in March. That goes back to the specific heat content of water. It takes a long time to heat up. It also takes a long time to cool down. Well, when the sun is in the northern hemisphere is shining at its least in December, January, well, the oceans are still warm from being heated up previously in the year, but now it starts to cool off, such to the point that it is at its coldest in March. It's giving off its latent heat, and now, even though the sun energy has been inputting in, it takes a while for now to heat it back up, to absorb that energy and heat it up. As I've discussed with you guys before, think the specific heat of water is so much higher than air. It takes considerably more energy to heat up the same given volume of water versus the same given volume of air. It takes much more energy to heat up water than does the air. So that is also testament to how much energy the oceans have absorbed. Okay, so now they look at warming. Few long-term hydrographic or biodiversity data series exist for the deep ocean in climate-relevant timescales, usually of decades. Repeat hydrographic surveys have allowed estimates of decadal warming in deep basins, yielding an average temperature increase of up to 0.1 degrees Celsius per decade in the global ocean. It may not sound like much, but at deep depths, that is significant. Situation is heterogeneous among and across deep sea basins. Much higher warming rates are, for example, documented in the Arctic and Southern Ocean, the polar regions. There's a shock. Most deep sea species live in very stable thermal regimes. Warming of 1 degree C or less may exert stress or cause shifts in the depth or latitudinal distributions and other species interactions. Now, species that cannot tolerate a wide temperature range are called stenothermal. Right? Just like those that cannot tolerate a wide range of salinity are called stenohaline. Species found in the deep depth where it's pretty stable conditions, there's really no need for them to be what would be the opposite, eurythermal or euryhaline. Species that live in, say, estuaries, wide range of salinities and wide range of temperatures over the course of a day. Those species can tolerate the wide range. They're called eurythermal. They can tolerate a wide range of temperature. Euryhaline, they can tolerate a wide range of salinities. Deep sea critters, no. There's no need for them. So any changes in their system can be a stress. So they're either going to have to move to go to conditions that they're used to and hope they can find food. Okay. So we have sort of a Venn diagram here. We have warming, deoxygenation, acidification, changes in the POC flux. Basically, the 1, 2, 3, right? POC that they referred to in the first figure. And they talk about king crabs invading Palmer Deep in the Antarctic enabled by warming. So looking at winners and losers from exposures to interacting climate stressors. So that's A, king crabs. B would be cold sea fauna may expand as warming promotes methane release from the seafloor. And then C is, so it's going clockwise, starting from here. So C comes down to cold water, coral reefs, vulnerable to warming and acidification in Mediterranean canyons. And then D is hypoxia-tolerant Humboldt squid have extended their distribution in concert with expanding oxygen minima along the East Pacific margin. So basically what they're saying there is that squids can tolerate low oxygen levels. Fish usually do not. So as the fish die off, the squid are exploiting the niche left behind. It's basically what the implication is there. I said, I'm not going to read the entire article here for you. I will leave the URL for you so that you can read it in detail as you wish and ruminate and digest the information. So let's look at acidification. Both excess CO2 absorption and the oxidation of organic matter in the water column are causing acidification of intermediate depth waters globally. Subsequent subduction of high CO2 waters via Thermohaline circulation, that's deep water formation, is contributing to rapid acidification in the North Atlantic. Elevated CO2 is predicted to reduce the suitable habitat range for calcifying species over multiple life stages. For example, coral polyps, they have a medusa and they have a polyp stage, as do jellyfish. And depending on the species, some of them can secrete a calcium carbonate mineralization, other stages may not. And so, and as I discussed with you before, acidification can lead to dissolving of such structures, and that could have adverse impacts on the organisms. Deoxygenation, this is another biggie. A warming ocean holds less oxygen. A warmer ocean is also more stratified because warm water is less dense than cold water, and strong density gradients reduce vertical mixing. The combined effects of reduced oxygen solubility and warmer water, increased thermal stratification, create widespread oxygen reduction, termed deoxygenation, and if it gets slow enough, you can then create the kill zone. Remember, I have mentioned this before. In order to have productivity, that is photosynthesis leading productivity in the ecosystem, in the water, you need two events. You need a vertical mixing event, basically an overturn of the water column, followed by a stabilization of the water column that is usually done via stratification, where you set up a pycnocline, and therefore all the nutrients are trapped within the photic zone. The phytoplankton can go to town, use up the nutrients, do their thing, create the biomass, zooplankton feed on them, and so etc. Well, if you start creating a permanent stratification in the upper layers, you're not going to mix in the nutrients. Phytoplankton are going to die off. They die off, the zooplankton die off, the fish that feed on the zooplankton die off, the fish that feed on the fish that feed on the zooplankton die off. Basically, the ecosystem can collapse. And by the way, I did some time ago, I did a video discussing turnovers and stratification within freshwater lake systems to give you an idea of how that works. So go check out that video. So oxygen exerts tremendous control on marine biodiversity through effects on evolution, physiology, reproduction, behavior, species interaction. ENSO, which is El Nino Southern Oscillation, induced changes in oxygenation, can also have an effect. There are long-term studies that link oxygen reduction to shifts in extant ecosystems on the deep sea floor. Now let's look at some of the comments about organic flux and hydrodynamics. Increased stratification not only limits deep water ventilation, mixing, but also reduces nutrient supply to surface waters from the deeper ocean. Right? If you have that stratification, shallow waters, you can't penetrate that. You're not going to get those nutrients into the photic zone. That's because that's where nutrients are recycled. Predicted reduction of phytoplankton production will result in lower particulate organic carbon fluxes to the deep ocean, particularly at mid to low latitudes. Below large oligotrophic areas, already food-poor abyssal plain may be further deprived of organic matter supply. Oligotrophic means basically it's regions that have poor productivity. If someone says, oh, look at that crystal clear, look at that lake with the crystal clear blue waters. Show me a lake with crystal clear blue waters, and I'll show you a lake that's oligotrophic. It has very little productivity. High productivity is referred to as eutrophic, and it tends to be, greenish because of the producers making the water more opaque. So basically, if you're reducing the productivity in the surface water, then you're going to reduce the particulate flux, the flux of the organic matter to the deep areas that do rely on them. When the phytoplanktons and the zooplanktons die, they sink through the water column. We actually call it marine snow. And that finds its way down to the deep portions of the ocean where it's utilized. So if we reduce surface productivity, you're going to reduce deep water productivity. So, they talk about regional variation is evident, etc. As I said, if I was to read this entire article for you, we'd probably be at this for an hour and a half. I've already made some very long, hour-long videos. I'm sure you're probably sick of listening to me talk for long periods of time. Anyway, so stressor interactions. Interactions among climate stresses and deep sea ecosystems are complex. Go back to figure 1. Warming combined with acidification is predicted to deprive deep water corals, now abundant on the South Australia margin, of suitable habitat. In other areas expanding at bathyal depths, acidification from anthropogenic CO2 is further enhanced because the same process that draws down the oxygen via respiration releases CO2. The combination of expanding midwater deoxygenation from below with surface warming and acidification from above reduces the habitability of pelagic, that's open water, waters for species such as vertically migrating fish and krill. Krill is basically a crustacean. Krill, for baleen whales, they feed on those. A lot of organisms, zooplankton and fish, exhibit what's called DVM, diel vertical migration. In other words, they move vertically up and down in the water column depending on the time of day. Presumably, they come up to the surface waters at night to feed. Nighttime, it's dark, they're less likely to be seen and preyed upon themselves by other predators. And when they're going up into the photic zone, and then when the sun's starting to come back out, they don't want to be seen. So they swim out of the photic zone and go to deeper depths to avoid predation. So a lot of organisms exhibit diel vertical migration. Now they discuss adaptations to combined climate stressors have occurred and are exhibited by stress-tolerant organisms in today's oceans. For most deep water species, there are no data on the range shifts, physiological changes, life history alterations, or rapid evolution necessary to adapt. So they talk about mitigation and adaptation, obviously reduction of burning fossil fuels and CO2, reducing CO2 emissions are paramount. So this is this is science. This is what science looks like. Right? Papers such as this, where we communicate to our colleagues what we're doing, what where the state of our knowledge is, and go from there. So as I said, I'll leave the URL in the description box, and you can pull it up for your own personal use. Please do not share with others. But for your own personal use, and that would be fine. And there's a lot of good information in here, some detailed information. And I hope you find this useful and informative. So thank you for your time. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to subscribe to this channel, to share my videos, tell others of the work that I do here. I also ask that if you are not already a patron at Patreon, to please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. You can find the information in the description box below the video. I'm asking you to help support the work that I do. I do not take any money from corporations or from any other sources, so the information I share with you is the actual science as it comes out of the peer-reviewed journals. So there is no BS, there's no propaganda, there's no agenda. It's just I present the science and I explain to you what it means, or at least my interpretations of it, based on my own experience as a scientist. I want this channel to grow. I consider, while I discuss many different topics here, you've noticed I do focus a lot on climate issues. I consider climate change to be the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Thus, I consider it important to disseminate this information to a wider and wider, more and more people. And I need your help to do this. So, yes, please subscribe. Please tell others of the work that I do here. Please share my videos on social media platforms, with your social media groups, what have you. We need to get this information out there. So for those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I thank you greatly for your support and continued support. It does mean a lot to me. So together we can get this information to more and more people. Thank you. Thank you for your support.